We add to our prayer request today, it's from Wendy Walters, the Barnes Elementary staff and the Fish family on the loss of Mrs. Candace Fish, one of the teachers there, on September 13th. And so we hold them in our prayers as well. We pray with you. Gracious God, these words that we have today glorify you as we continue to celebrate our love and care in this place. May we be open to those who are in need, especially these we've lifted up, this community that has lost an important part of our educational system. Guide this family and direct the students and Barnes Elementary staff and all of Medill staff as they grieve this loss. We ask this in Christ. Amen. There's a two-stage explanation why it's helpful to walk on the path of Spirit. Paul, he breaks it down for us easily. Two categories: walking in the Spirit or walking in the flesh. Thinking that goes with the flesh for Paul is death, and thinking that goes with the Spirit is life and it's peace. This life and death contest is not new for Paul as we study Paul. The idea being that the flesh is personified and thinks in a certain way and then becomes embodied in certain individuals, just as the Spirit does the same. Paul reminds us that walking in the flesh, or in the muck and mire of humanity, we are bound to be human at times, and sometimes we're at odds with God. But walking in the Spirit allows us and calls us to think about things differently, and we become more attuned to God. Think maybe of the influence of the early philosophers. The flesh and humanity were temporal. The Spirit was eternal, was forever. Paul explains that flesh thinking is hostile to God. Jesus reminded people to love God, to love your neighbor, and to love yourself. Just in that commandment, what could possibly go wrong for all of us? How could we blow that one? In fact, it is much more the time we are flesh thinkers. What can I do for me, and what can I do for mine? What's good for me? Who cares about them, and why should I care? As poet, theologian, and rocker Don Henley put it, I got mine, I hope you get yours. That's kind of that thinking. If those people were just a little more like me, they would have what I have. Or in the corporate perspective, who cares if it gives people cancer? It's our business, and we have to take care of the bottom line, and we have to take care of our investors. Is that life-giving or death-dealing? You'll hear this from me through the years. Life-giving or death-dealing. It means if something is going on, for example, if someone comes up to you and says, you are just the most horrible person in the world. Is that life-giving to you? Probably not. And is it death-dealing to you? Sure it is. Have you ever had those experiences? Have you ever been bullied in your life? That's not very life-giving, is it? It's death-dealing, not only to the person that is a recipient, but it's also death-dealing to the person who hands it out. So you're going to hear over the years a lot about life-giving or death-dealing from me. Paul reminds us that which is in the flesh will eventually die, and that which walks in the Spirit gives life and is eternal. And you've heard me now say it. Is it life-giving or is it death-dealing? Think about that in all of your relationships that you had so far. Think about the relationships that were life-giving to you. Those people who have lifted you up and have given you life by the actions and the words they've done. Think also, probably every single person here can think of someone, at least one person, who has been death-dealing in their life, who has dealt death to us, that crushing of the Spirit, dealing death to us. And that is a part of who we are as a people. When we look at our world around us, are we giving life to it, or are we dealing death to it? It's about who we are and how we connect in. I want to say here, I don't believe that it is all or nothing with the flesh. I think the things about that, as Paul understands that, is a little different. Flesh can do some pretty amazing things, and flesh can be amazing as well. I don't see it as that much of a dichotomy as Paul does. And if we are created in the image of God, then flesh can't all be bad. That is for sure. But Paul, as do others classify, pretty much everything in the flesh is bad. But we are called to walk in this flesh, in the way of the Spirit. In all of our humanity, the words of flesh and the world of flesh are connected to the divine. We are divine creations made in the image of God. And that can't be all that bad. In all of our humanity, get this world of flesh to connect with the divine. That's the key. Think about those stories on Facebook when somebody went out of their way and how you felt about that. To care for someone in need, life-giving to that person in need. One recent story as a border incident with our neighbor. There was a Canadian crossing from the United States by a Sudanese family, and they were here illegally. They had no papers. They were all of those kind of things that we hear about in the news. And they were taken to the border by a taxi cab. And it just so happens that a border guard came up and encountered them. And they fled. They ran across the border into Canada. And there were the people, the border people from Canada on the other side. And so you might kind of wonder, why didn't they fire a couple of warning shots? The Border Patrol, why didn't he fire a shot or two over their heads? Or why didn't he do something different? They ran across the border. By all accounts, they were lawbreakers after all. But something happened there that was life-giving. The U.S. Guard put their belongings right on the border, right where they would still be able to access them and have their things. And think about this. All of your possessions, along with a family of 6 in a taxi cab. Think what that might be. I know you're thinking about that. They're lawbreakers after all. And so the U.S. Guard put them on the border, their things on the border. They picked those things up. He let them do that, and they took their things into Canada. Walking in the Spirit is part of who we're supposed to be. It seems to me that the flesh was doing its job on both sides of the border, upholding laws on one side and the other, and then offering a helping hand also on the other. Walking in the Spirit came in when the U.S. Border Guard put this family's belongings close to the border before he went away. The guard could have easily taken all of that family's possessions, all that they could fit in a taxi cab as well. He could have taken those families' belongings and he could have thrown them away, or he could have divided them up between other border guards, but he didn't. We ask the question, whose possessions would Jesus Christ confiscate? What would you do in that situation? For-profit college president was fired for allowing a schizophrenic student to sleep in the school library when temperatures were sub-freezing outside. What would you do in that situation? The idea is, for Paul, is innovation. Innovate your mind and later on your heart toward the Spirit, and doing so will set you free. Don't you want to be free? Don't we all want to be free? And you never know where innovation will lead you. A man was driving along the freeway and he noticed a chicken running alongside his car. He was amazed to see that this chicken was going so fast along the way with him because he was doing 50 miles an hour. He accelerated to 60 and the chicken stayed right with him, right next to him. He accelerated to 75 and the chicken passed him along the road. Man noticed the chicken had 3 legs. So he followed the chicken down the road and ended up at a farm. He got out of his car and saw that all the chickens in the farmer's yard had 3 legs. So he asked the farmer, what's up with these chickens? The farmer said, well, everybody likes chicken legs. I bred a 3-legged bird. I'm going to be a millionaire, he told this guy. And the man asked him, well, how do they taste? And the farmer says, well, I don't know. I haven't caught one yet. So you've got to be careful what you're innovating to, I guess, as well. But Jesus was an innovator. He was told, you can't do that. He was told, you can't do that. That kind of thinking isn't allowed in this religious circle or this political circle. If you keep talking like that, something is going to happen to you. You're a lawbreaker, after all, Jesus. But he moved past the flesh of the day and said, you can't help those people. That's what they told him. And they told him, wait for a better day to heal those hands, Jesus. But he innovated. He said, if you do this to the least of these, you do it to me. Ouch. How many times have I blown that one? And how about you? As Christians, we are called to be innovation stations. We are bombarded with the flesh of the world, and we are commanded to reach out, just like Jesus reached out, and to care for those who are vulnerable, who are weak, and are outcast. And the question for us is, do we really do that? Do we really do that? We say that we are walking in the Spirit, and we give some pretty good lip service to walking in that Spirit, and sometimes we do. Oh, we do. But other times we miss. And that is part of our human condition. But Jesus says it's okay if you miss sometimes. Just get yourself back together. Innovate in a way that helps you understand that you need to be connected in. We miss that mark too. Perhaps if we innovated to 0. Have you ever innovated to 0? Truth is, you don't have to do it all by yourself. If everyone would allow a little more Spirit to infuse their lives, many needs would be met in this world. But I'm here to accumulate stuff, aren't I? I'm here to do that. I got mine, and I hope you get yours. In 2010, Bill Gates did a TED Talk, and he said, innovate to 0. He presented that idea. You don't know who Bill Gates is. He's a philanthropist and an innovator, and he did a little thing with computers back in the 80s that still is affecting us today. But he said, inspire the brightest minds to a task, move to 0. Move to 0. And there are times when 0 is bad. You make a 0 on a test. Not so good. 0 in your bank account is really not good, is it? 0 on the speedometer means you are stuck in traffic again. Someone telling another, you're a 0. Or even worse, you say that to yourself. But sometimes 0 can be good. What about 0 cancer cells in that body? 0 emissions from a car or factory, 0 hate, 0 racism, 0 whichever one of the 10 commandments you want to fill in that spot. But sometimes 0 is good. 0 dysfunction in our lives. Innovate to 0, he said. These things which are negative for you and others in the world, those things that deal death instead of giving life, you should innovate to 0. 0 things that are death-dealing to yourself and others. As we look toward what's ahead in the journey with Jesus, we journey with him to Jerusalem, and we journey to him through his birth. We wait there for the opportunity for us to experience once again the resurrection and life that is given to us. We hear and remember those stories each and every time we are gathered. We wish that there could be a different outcome in Jesus' existence, but that the flesh wouldn't win once again. But we know differently, don't we? We know that story, that the flesh wouldn't win again, but it does. But there's something different for us. There's a new message that is calling us once again to understand this life of resurrection that we have in Christ. The world would walk the path of the Spirit would be better, but it doesn't always. Paul tells us that living just for ourselves leads us down a bad path, and it leads to death for us. But living in the Spirit brings life and connection and hope for our world. The real innovation for followers of Jesus is that we follow that story and we put the faith we get from it into action. We are where flesh and spirit have the opportunity to live out the final part of the story. And we can't forget that third day, can we? Because we know what the third day means. That death has been overcome and life has been given once again. A day where they find the tomb empty and the death does not have the final victory. Out of that victory, you and I create innovation stations in the world all around us so that when we face the bad zeros of the world, we are called into action. We're called into action to innovate, because just like Jesus, we will encounter people all the time who will not want innovation to happen. The old ways are better. Ever hear that one in your life? It's just a little discrimination. Why can't you just shut up and play by the rules? Why even bring up justice issues in our world today? Paul's point is that the transformation of the mind is an important step to innovating the presence of the Spirit into our world. And that starts with me. And it starts with you. And you. And you. And you. And you. And you. And that whole section over there. To be innovators of faith. That's what we are called to be. And it might just lead us to rethink the parts of that faith, those which are sometimes even incomprehensible to all of us. And as you become an innovator in faith, that is being just like Jesus. You may face trials and tribulations, and as you are an innovation of the station for God, you might not quite understand what you are being called to do. But just remember, if you fully understand that, it's not innovation. Amen. Our hymn of dedication comes to us today. We sing together. It's an opportunity for us to proclaim our faith in Christ, to be baptized in Him, to also join in the ministries of this church and celebrate the innovation that you can bring into this space, but also to always remember the baptismal waters you may have already encountered in your life, and to remember that moment and remember those commitments that you made at that time. So let us sing this hymn of dedication and beat out my vision, number 595.